Here is a question that keeps me up at night. Not the equations, not the particles, something much stranger. I want you to pinch yourself. Go ahead, do it. Feel that? There is something there, something experiencing that pinch, something aware. Now here is the disturbing part. We know exactly what your skin is made of. Atoms, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen. We know what your nerves are made of. The same stuff. We know what your brain is made of. 86 billion neurons, 100 trillion connections, all of it atoms, just atoms. But where is the thing that felt the pinch? Point to it. Can you? Point to where your mind is. You will point to your head. Everybody does. But when we open up the head, when we look inside with all our fancy instruments, we find neurons. We find electrical signals. We find chemistry. We never find the thing that is doing the experiencing. This is not a small puzzle. This is the deepest problem in all of science. And I am going to show you why it is so disturbing, and why, after everything physics has accomplished, we still do not have the faintest idea what is going on. By the end of this talk, you will understand the real question. You will see why all the easy answers fail. And you might just walk away wondering if the universe is far stranger than any of us have dared to imagine. Let me start with something simple, something familiar. Look around the room you are in. You see colors. You see shapes. You hear sounds, maybe. You feel the chair beneath you or the floor under your feet. All of this seems obvious, natural, just the way things are. But stop and think about what is really happening. Light bounces off objects, electromagnetic radiation, photons. They enter your eye. They hit your retina. That triggers electrical signals in your optic nerve. Those signals travel to the back of your brain, to a place called the visual cortex. Neurons fire. Patterns form. And then something extraordinary happens. Something utterly inexplicable. You see red. You see blue. You experience the world. The light is not red. The light is just electromagnetic radiation with a certain wavelength, about 700 nanometers. There is nothing red about it. The neurons firing in your brain are not red either. They are just cells doing chemistry, sodium ions flowing in and out, electrical potentials changing. So where does the red come from? This is what the philosophers call qualia, the felt quality of experience, the redness of red, the painfulness of pain, the taste of chocolate. These are not just information, they are experiences. Somebody is home, having them. I once wrote a little poem about this. Standing at the seashore, watching the waves, mountains of molecules, each stupidly minding its own business, trillions apart, yet forming white surf in unison. And there I am. Atoms with consciousness, matter with curiosity, a universe of atoms, an atom in the universe. That is the puzzle. How do atoms become aware? Now wait. You might think we know the answer. The brain. Obviously. Consciousness comes from the brain, but that is not an answer. That is just pointing at the box where the mystery lives. Let me give you an analogy. Suppose I ask you how a car moves, and you say the engine. Okay, but what about the engine? Well, there are pistons. They go up and down. Fine. What makes them go up and down? Fuel explodes, pushes them. Aha! Now we are getting somewhere. We can trace the whole chain. Fuel burns, expansion, pressure, pistons move, crankshaft turns, wheels spin, car moves. Every step is mechanical, physical. We understand each link. Now try the same thing with the brain. Photons hit retina. Okay. Electrical signals travel through nerves. Okay. Neurons fire in patterns. Okay. And then somehow you experience the color red. Where is that step? What is the mechanism? What converts electrical activity into felt experience? Nobody knows. We do not even know what kind of answer would satisfy us. This is what David Chalmers calls the hard problem of consciousness, not the easy problems. The easy problems are things like, how does the brain process information? How does it control behavior? How does it integrate signals from different senses? Those are hard engineering problems, but they are tractable. We can imagine solving them. The hard problem is different. The hard problem is why there is any experience at all. Why is all this information processing accompanied by an inner life? Why is there something it is like to be you? Let me put it another way. Imagine you could build a perfect robot. It sees, it hears, it moves, it speaks. It does everything you do. From the outside, it behaves exactly like a conscious being. But inside, nothing. No experience, no inner life, just machinery processing information in the dark. Is such a robot possible? We do not know. But here is the point. From the physics alone, from the chemistry alone, from the neuroscience alone, we cannot tell the difference. Nothing in our equations says that certain arrangements of matter should have inner experiences and others should not. The philosopher Thomas Nagel wrote a famous paper about this. He asked a deceptively simple question: what is it like to be a bat? Think about it. Bats navigate by sonar. They send out high-pitched sounds and listen for the echoes. They can detect the shape, size, texture, and movement of insects in complete darkness. This is their primary way of knowing the world. Now you might try to imagine what that is like. You close your eyes. You imagine sending out sounds and hearing them bounce back. But Nagel says you cannot really do this. You are imagining what it would be like for you to have sonar. You are not imagining what it is like for the bat. The bat has its own inner life, its own experiences, its own way of being in the world, and we cannot access that. Not because we lack information, but because experiences are fundamentally subjective. They exist only from a particular point of view. This is the crux of the problem. Science is objective. We study things from the outside, we measure, we quantify, we build models. But consciousness is subjective. It exists from the inside, and we do not know how to bridge that gap. Let me tell you something that will make this even more puzzling. Your brain contains about 86 billion neurons. That is a lot, about as many as stars in the Milky Way. Each neuron connects to thousands of others. The total number of connections is around 100 trillion. 100 trillion. That is a number so large it is hard to fathom. If you tried to count to 100 trillion, one number per second, it would take you over 3 million years. But here is the thing. These neurons are scattered all over your brain. The ones that process vision are in the back. The ones that process sound are on the sides. The ones that process touch are along the top. Different features of the same object are handled in different places. The color of an apple is processed separately from its shape, separately from its location, separately from its motion. And yet, when you look at an apple, you do not see a red blob here and a round shape there and a certain location somewhere else. You see one apple, one unified experience. How? How does your brain take all these scattered pieces and bind them together into a single coherent experience? This is called the binding problem, and nobody has solved it. Some researchers thought they had found the answer. Neurons that fire together wire together. If neurons in different parts of the brain all fire at the same time, at the same rhythm, maybe that synchrony is what binds them. Maybe that is how the brain says these things go together. This is a nice idea, and there is some evidence for it. Neurons do synchronize their firing, often at frequencies around 40 cycles per second, the gamma rhythm. But here is the trouble. Synchrony does not explain experience. It just pushes the question back a step. Suppose I tell you that neurons A, B, and C all fire at 40 hertz. That tells me something about the timing of their activity, but it does not tell me why that synchronized activity feels like anything. It does not explain why there is an experiencer who experiences the unified apple. Let me give you another way to see this. There are neurons firing in my brain right now. There are neurons firing in your brain right now. Some of mine might even be firing at the same frequency as some of yours. But we do not share an experience. Your consciousness is yours, mine is mine. Why? The neurons are just cells. They do not know whose brain they are in. They just do their chemistry. So what makes your neurons your experience and my neurons my experience? I do not know. And as far as I can tell, nobody knows. Now let me tell you something even stranger. Let me show you how deep this rabbit hole goes. Your brain is made of atoms, about 7 octillion of them. That is a 7 with 27 zeros after it. And these atoms are made of smaller things, protons, neutrons, electrons. The protons and neutrons are made of quarks. The electrons, as far as we know, are fundamental. Now here's a question. Take one atom out of your brain. Are you still conscious? Surely, one atom cannot matter. You lose atoms all the time. You breathe them out, you sweat them out, they get replaced. The atoms in your body today are not the same atoms that were there 7 years ago. Almost all of them have been swapped out. So consciousness does not depend on any particular atoms. It must depend on the arrangement, the pattern, the information. But wait! The atoms are not really solid things. They are mostly empty space. The nucleus is tiny. The electrons are somewhere in a cloud of probability, and the forces between them are electromagnetic. When you touch something, you are not really touching anything. Electrons in your hand are repelling electrons on the table. It is all fields and forces. So your brain is not really a thing. It is a pattern of activity in fields. Electromagnetic fields, quantum fields, a constantly shifting dance of energy, and somehow that dance knows it is dancing. There is an idea that has been gaining attention. Maybe consciousness is not produced by the brain in the way a generator produces electricity. Maybe consciousness is more like what electricity is to the generator. Let me explain. The brain generates electromagnetic fields. Whenever neurons fire, they create tiny fluctuations in the electric and magnetic fields around them. These fields extend through and beyond the brain. You can measure them with EEG. You can measure them with MEG. Now, some researchers suggest that these electromagnetic fields are not just byproducts. They might be where consciousness lives. The idea is that the unified field integrates information in a way that scattered neurons cannot. When neurons fire synchronously, their fields add up. Constructive interference. When they fire out of sync, their fields cancel out. Destructive interference. This would explain the binding problem. The field is not scattered like the neurons. The field is everywhere, all at once. It could bind experiences together because it is inherently unified. Is this the answer? I do not know. It is an interesting idea, but it still does not explain why an electromagnetic field should feel like anything. Magnets have fields. Radios have fields. We do not think they are conscious. Why should the brain's field be different? Let me try another angle. Some physicists have suggested that consciousness might involve quantum mechanics. This is a tempting idea because quantum mechanics is already strange. Particles can be in two places at once. Measurements can affect outcomes. Entanglement connects distant things in spooky ways. Roger Penrose, a brilliant mathematician, proposed that quantum effects in tiny structures inside neurons might be important for consciousness. The structures are called microtubules. They are part of the cell's skeleton. Penrose and Stuart Hameroff suggested that quantum computations in these microtubules might give rise to conscious experiences. This is a bold idea. But there is a problem. The brain is warm and wet. Quantum effects are delicate. They get destroyed very quickly in such environments. Most physicists think the brain is too noisy for quantum mechanics to play a significant role. But here is the thing. Even if quantum effects were involved, it would not really solve the problem. Quantum mechanics is still physics. It tells us how things behave, not why they feel like anything. Saying consciousness is quantum does not explain consciousness. It just makes it quantum and mysterious instead of classical and mysterious. We keep running into the same wall. We can describe the brain in more and more detail. We can map every neuron, trace every connection, measure every signal. And at the end of it all, we still do not know why any of this activity is accompanied by experience. Let me try a thought experiment. This is the kind of thing I love. Let us really push our intuitions. Imagine we could record every single thing happening in your brain while you look at a red apple. Every neuron firing, every chemical released, every electrical potential changing. We store all this information in a computer. Now imagine we play it back. We recreate all the exact same signals in a different brain, or maybe in an artificial system. The patterns are identical. Does this new system experience seeing a red apple? You might think yes, same pattern, same experience, but wait, we could slow it down. Play the recording at half speed. Is the experience now in slow motion? We could play it backwards. Does the system experience seeing the apple disappear? We could scramble the recording, play all the signals in random order. Is there still an experience? Presumably not. But why not? Every signal still occurs. Every component is there. The difference is the relationships between them, the structure. So consciousness depends on structure. Fine. But what structure? What makes one arrangement conscious and another not? Here is an even stranger version. Imagine we write down all the information about your brain at a single moment, all the positions and states of all the particles. We put this information in a book, a very large book. Is the book conscious? It contains all the same information as your brain at that moment. You probably want to say no. The book is just ink on paper. It is not doing anything. There is no activity, no process. Consciousness seems to require not just information, but processing. Change over time. But how much processing? And what kind? These questions do not have clear answers. Let me tell you something that really bothers me. We know a lot about how the brain works. We know which areas light up when you see faces. We know which areas are active when you feel fear. We know that damage to certain areas causes specific deficits. Damage the fusiform face area, and you cannot recognize faces. Damage the hippocampus, and you cannot form new memories. All of this is wonderful neuroscience. But notice what it is. It is correlations. Brain activity, A, correlates with experience. B, we find the correlates of consciousness. But correlates are not explanations. If I tell you that a thermometer reading correlates with temperature, I have not explained temperature. The thermometer is just measuring something. The question is, what is being measured? When we find neural correlates of consciousness, we are finding where and when consciousness is associated with brain activity. We are not finding how or why that activity becomes experience. Some people think this is just a matter of more research. Once we understand the brain better, the mystery will dissolve. Consciousness will turn out to be an emergent property, like wetness emerges from water molecules. The molecules are not wet individually, but put enough of them together and wetness appears. I am not so sure. Wetness is not really a deep mystery. We understand what it is for something to be wet. Molecules move around, they stick to surfaces, they flow. Wetness is just a way of describing certain behaviors of matter at a large scale. Consciousness is different. It is not just a behavior. It is not just a pattern. It is the fact that there is something it is like to be the system. That is a different kind of thing altogether. Let me put it this way. Suppose I gave you a complete description of a brain. Every atom, every connection, every process. And suppose I asked you to predict what the person would do, what they would say, how they would behave. In principle, with enough computing power, you could do this. The brain is physical. It obeys physical laws. But now suppose I asked you a different question. What is this person experiencing right now? What does it feel like to be them? The complete physical description does not answer this question. It cannot, because the question is asking about something subjective, something from the inside, and the physical description is all from the outside. This is what philosophers call the explanatory gap. There is a gap between physical descriptions and conscious experiences, and we do not know how to bridge it. Now, some people try to avoid this problem. They say consciousness is an illusion. There is nobody really home. The brain just processes information and generates reports about having experiences, but there is no actual experiencer. I find this very hard to take seriously. An illusion for whom? If there is an illusion, there must be someone being fooled, and that someone is having an experience, the experience of being fooled. You cannot eliminate consciousness by saying it is an illusion, because having an illusion is itself a kind of experience. This is not like other illusions. A mirage looks like water, but there is no water. Fine. The appearance of water is an illusion, but the appearance itself is real. You are really having a visual experience that resembles water. Saying consciousness is an illusion would be like saying the appearance is an illusion too. But then what is having the appearance? We are going in circles. And that, I think, tells us something important. Consciousness is not like other problems. It is not going to be solved by the usual methods. We might need entirely new concepts, new ways of thinking. Let me tell you what I think the situation is, and I want to be honest. This is speculation. This is a physicist at the edge of what we know, looking into the darkness. I think consciousness might be fundamental. I do not mean that everything is conscious, though some people believe that. I mean that consciousness might be like mass, or charge, or space-time, not derivable from something more basic, just there as a feature of reality. If this is true, then we should not expect to explain consciousness in terms of physics. We should expect to find laws that connect consciousness to physics, just as we have laws that connect mass to motion or charge to electromagnetic fields. This is not a popular view among physicists. We like to explain things. We like to reduce complex phenomena to simple components. But maybe consciousness is where reduction stops. Maybe it is bedrock. I do not know if this is right. But I think it is worth taking seriously, because after centuries of trying, after all our progress in neuroscience and physics, we still have not made 1 inch of progress on the hard problem. That should tell us something. Let me leave you with this thought. You are sitting there listening to me, or reading this, whatever the case may be. You are having experiences right now, the sound of these words, the sight of this room, the feeling of your body. All of this is happening. It is undeniable. It is the most certain thing there is. And yet, from the point of view of physics, you are a collection of atoms, just atoms. Carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and a few trace elements, quarks and electrons. Arranged in a very complicated pattern, yes, but still just atoms. Those atoms were forged in the hearts of stars. Billions of years ago, they floated through space, gathered into planets, combined into molecules, organized into cells, grew into organisms, and eventually became you. And now those atoms are looking back at the universe and wondering where they came from. Matter with curiosity, atoms with consciousness, the universe waking up to itself. Is there anything more astonishing than that? I do not have the answer to the mystery of consciousness. Nobody does. But I think it is one of the most important questions we can ask, because it is not just a question about the brain. It is a question about what we are. It is a question about what the universe is. And maybe, just maybe, when we finally understand consciousness, we will understand everything differently. We will see that the universe is not just matter in motion. We will see that it is, in some deep way, aware of itself, and that we are that awareness, looking out through 86 billion neurons, wondering at the wonder of it all. But wait, I want to push this further, because I have not told you about some of the strangest experiments, the ones that really twist your intuitions. There is a surgery called a corpus callosotomy. Doctors sometimes perform it on patients with severe epilepsy. The corpus callosum is a thick bundle of nerve fibers that connects the left and right hemispheres of your brain. About 200 million fibers. Cut it, and the hemispheres cannot talk to each other anymore. What happens? The patients seem mostly normal. They walk around, they talk, they live their lives. But when you test them carefully, something bizarre emerges. Show a picture to the left visual field. It goes to the right hemisphere. That hemisphere cannot speak, because language is usually in the left hemisphere. Ask the patient what they saw, and they say nothing. But ask them to draw what they saw with their left hand, which is controlled by the right hemisphere, and they draw the picture perfectly. The left hemisphere does not know what the right hemisphere saw, but the right hemisphere knew. It just could not say. Now here is the question. Does this patient have one consciousness or two? Is there one person in there with two separate streams of information? Or are there two persons sharing one body, each unaware of the other? The patients say they feel like one person. But the patients who say that are using their left hemisphere to speak. What would the right hemisphere say if it could talk? We do not know. And this uncertainty goes to the heart of the mystery. What are the boundaries of a consciousness? Where does one mind end and another begin? Let me give you another thought experiment. This one really kept me up at night when I first heard it. Imagine a machine, a teleporter. It scans every atom in your body, every position, every state, everything. It transmits this information to Mars. And on Mars, it assembles a perfect copy of you from new atoms. The original, here on Earth, is destroyed in the scanning process. The person on Mars wakes up. They have all your memories. They think they are you. They remember stepping into the teleporter on Earth. From their perspective, there was no interruption. They blink, and they are on Mars. But is that person you? Some people say yes. What matters is the pattern, not the atoms. The atoms get replaced all the time anyway. If the pattern is preserved, you are preserved. Other people say no. You died when the scanner destroyed your body. The person on Mars is a copy, a very good copy, with your memories and personality, but still a copy, a new person who falsely believes they are you. How would you decide? Both versions have the same claim to be you. Both have your memories, your personality, your sense of being you. There is no test that could distinguish them. No experiment that would reveal which one is the real you. This is deeply unsettling because it suggests that there might not be a fact of the matter. There might not be a real you that persists through time. Just a series of momentary experiences stitched together by memory into the illusion of continuity. But then who is having the illusion? You see how we keep coming back to the same problem. Every time we try to think our way out of it, we end up right back where we started. There is something it is like to be you, and we do not know what that something is. Let me try yet another approach. Let us think about what consciousness does. Here is an interesting observation. Everything you are aware of is slightly in the past. Light takes time to travel to your eyes. Sound takes time to reach your ears. Nerve signals take time to reach your brain. Processing takes time. By the time you are aware of something, it happened a fraction of a second ago. But you do not experience the world as delayed. You experience it as happening now. Your brain must be doing something to stitch together information that arrives at different times. It creates a unified present moment out of scattered signals. This is another binding problem, temporal binding. How does the brain bind events from different times into a single experience of the present? And here is another puzzle. You do not experience the gaps. You blink, and the world does not go dark. Your eyes make tiny movements called saccades, and during those movements you are effectively blind. But you do not notice. Your brain papers over the gaps. So your experience of the world is not a direct perception. It is a construction, a model, a best guess based on incomplete and delayed information. Your brain is a prediction machine, constantly filling in the blanks, smoothing over inconsistencies, creating the appearance of a seamless, continuous reality. But here is the strange part. The construction is experienced by something. There is a viewer watching the constructed movie. Who is that viewer, and where do they sit? This is where it gets really mind-bending. The viewer cannot be in the brain, because the viewer would have to experience the signals from the brain, and those signals would have to be processed by something else, and that something else would need its own viewer, and we would be in an infinite regress. There is a famous argument against this called the homunculus fallacy. You cannot explain consciousness by putting a little person inside the brain who watches a screen, because then you would have to explain the consciousness of the little person. You would need a smaller person inside that person's brain, and so on forever. So consciousness cannot work like a movie theater. There is no screen, no projector, no viewer sitting in a seat. The experience must be generated in some other way, a way that does not require a separate observer, but we do not know what that way is. Let me tell you something else that puzzles me. The problem of unconscious processing, most of what your brain does you are not aware of. You are not aware of regulating your heartbeat, your breathing, your digestion. You are not aware of the complex computations that let you recognize faces, understand speech, or catch a ball. These things happen automatically, below the surface. But some things do reach consciousness. The redness of red, the pain of a stubbed toe, the taste of coffee. What determines which processes become conscious and which do not? Some researchers think consciousness is like a spotlight, a limited resource that can only illuminate a small part of the brain's activity at a time. Attention is the spotlight operator, pointing the light at whatever seems most important. But this just rephrases the question, what makes the spotlight light? What is this illumination that we call awareness? Saying that some processes are conscious and others are not does not explain what consciousness is. It just labels the mystery. Here is another strange fact. Anesthesia. We can put people to sleep with drugs. Their brain keeps working. Neurons keep firing. But consciousness disappears. Where does it go? When you wake up from anesthesia, there is a gap. You were under at one moment, then you were waking up. The time in between does not exist for you. It was not experienced at all. Not even as darkness or blankness. Just nothing. This shows that consciousness can be turned off. Whatever it is, it depends on certain conditions. Change the chemistry of the brain, and consciousness goes away. Restore the chemistry, and it comes back. But notice, the atoms do not change. The neurons do not disappear. The structure is mostly preserved. What changes is the activity, the patterns of firing. So consciousness seems to depend on activity, not structure. A dead brain has all the same atoms as a living brain, but no consciousness. The difference is the electricity, the flow of signals, the dynamics. But what kind of dynamics? Any dynamics? Surely not. A hurricane has dynamics. A whirlpool has dynamics. We do not think they are conscious. There must be something special about the kind of dynamics in a brain. Is it complexity? Brains are very complex. But some things are complex without being conscious. The economy is complex. The weather is complex. The internet is complex. Complexity alone does not seem to be enough. Is it computation? Brains compute, but computers compute too. We can build machines that do everything the brain does, at least in terms of information processing. Should we expect these machines to be conscious? This is the question of artificial intelligence and consciousness. If we build a machine that processes information the same way a brain does, will it have experiences? Will there be something it is like to be that machine? Some people say yes. Consciousness is substrate independent. If you implement the right algorithm, consciousness will arise regardless of whether it is running on neurons or silicon. Other people say no. There is something special about biological neurons, about the wet chemistry of the brain, that is necessary for consciousness. A simulation is not the real thing. A perfect simulation of fire does not burn. A perfect simulation of water does not quench thirst. Maybe a perfect simulation of a brain does not experience. I do not know which view is right, but I know this. The question cannot be answered by looking at behavior alone. A machine might act conscious without being conscious. A zombie, in the philosophical sense. It would say all the right things, behave in all the right ways, but inside, nothing. How would we know? How could we tell the difference between a conscious machine and a very good imitation? We cannot. And that is disturbing, because it means we cannot really know if anything other than ourselves is conscious. I assume you are conscious. I behave as if you have experiences like mine, but I have no way to verify this. Your behavior is all I can see. This is the problem of other minds, and it is connected to the hard problem, because both problems arise from the same source, the privacy of consciousness, the fact that experiences exist only from the inside. Now, let me step back and ask a bigger question. Why does any of this matter? It matters because consciousness is not just another phenomenon. It is the phenomenon. It is the only thing we know directly. Everything else we know through consciousness. Physics, chemistry, biology. All of it comes to us through experience. We see the world, hear the world, touch the world. Without consciousness, there would be no knowing at all. So consciousness is not at the periphery of our understanding. It is at the center. It is the lens through which we see everything else. And here is another reason it matters. Consciousness is where value lives. Pain hurts. Pleasure feels good. Joy, sorrow, love, fear. These are not just information. They are experiences with intrinsic qualities. They matter because they feel like something. If consciousness did not exist, would anything matter? I do not think so. A universe of unconscious matter doing its physics would just be stuff happening, no better or worse than any other stuff. The fact that some arrangements of matter can suffer, can enjoy, can care, that is what makes things meaningful. So understanding consciousness is not just a scientific puzzle. It is a philosophical puzzle, an ethical puzzle, maybe even a spiritual puzzle. It touches on everything. I want to be careful here. I do not want to pretend that physics has nothing to say about consciousness. Physics has a lot to say. We know that consciousness depends on the brain. We know that changing the brain changes consciousness. We know that certain brain regions are associated with certain experiences. All of this is valuable knowledge. But physics has not explained the central mystery. Why is there experience at all? Why does information processing feel like something? Why am I not a zombie? And until we answer these questions, we do not really understand what we are. Let me leave you with one more image. Imagine you are looking up at the night sky. You see stars, thousands of them, millions of them, each one a sun, many with planets, an unimaginably vast universe stretching billions of light years in every direction. And here you are, a tiny speck, a collection of atoms on a small planet orbiting an ordinary star in an average galaxy. But you are a collection of atoms that knows it is a collection of atoms. You are matter that contemplates matter. You are the universe looking at itself. How did that happen? How did the universe manage to become aware of itself? I do not know, but I find it astonishing. Of all the arrangements of matter that could exist, one arrangement has the property of awareness. One arrangement can step back and say, what is all this? Why is there something rather than nothing? What am I? Those atoms in your brain. The carbon was made in a dying star. The oxygen came from a supernova. The hydrogen has been around since the beginning, since the first few minutes after the Big Bang. Those atoms have been through a lot. They have been part of interstellar gas clouds, of planets, of other living things, and now they are part of you, having experiences, asking questions, atoms with consciousness, matter with curiosity. It is the most remarkable thing in the universe, and we have no idea how it works, but that is okay. Not knowing is not a failure. It is an opportunity. It means there is something left to discover, something big, something fundamental, something that might change everything we think we know. And that, to me, is the most exciting thing in the world. Thank you for thinking about this with me. Now I have a question for you. Here is what I want to know. If you had to bet, what do you think consciousness really is? Is it just the brain doing complicated things? Is it something more? Is it fundamental? Or is there something I have not considered? Something obvious that I am missing? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I genuinely want to know.